In a world where advanced alien civilizations have no place for Earth's primitive ways, Chef Owen's simple cooking could spark something far beyond just culinary appreciation. Princess Lyra, an alien princess with a high opinion of her own planet's sophisticated food, is about to learn that sometimes the most unexpected things can change the course of a journey. And it all starts with a loaf of garlic butter bread. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. If you love a story that mixes food, culture, and unexpected friendships, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's chapter is just as surprising. Chef Owen had never expected his quiet life to intersect with an alien princess. Yet here he was, standing in his modest kitchen, preparing something as simple as garlic butter bread for a guest who had never even seen Earth's food as anything but primitive. Princess Lyra, with her shimmering lavender skin and glowing silvery hair, looked unimpressed as she sat at the kitchen counter. Her large eyes scanned the room, her posture regal yet distant. Her world was one of advanced technologies, cities that floated in the sky, and food that could be synthesized with a thought. Earth's humble meals, she'd said, were beneath her and beneath her people. Chef Owen wiped his hands on his apron and smiled warmly at her. "You've never tried this before?" he asked, as he placed a freshly baked loaf of bread on the counter, steam rising from it. The aroma of garlic and butter filled the air, and for a moment, Lyra's lips twitched, perhaps with curiosity, perhaps with something else. "I've tasted Earth's food," she replied, her voice a cool melody. "It is primitive. There's nothing to it, no complexity, no science, just bread." Owen chuckled softly as he sliced into the loaf, the buttery insides glistening. He spread a generous layer of the garlic butter across it, watching as it melted and bubbled. "Sometimes, it's the simplest things that have the most flavor." Princess Lyra raised an eyebrow. "If you insist, but I have tasted food that defies the limits of what you call flavor. You'll see." Owen didn't respond right away. Instead, he offered her a piece of the warm bread, watching her closely. Her hesitation was barely noticeable, but it was there. With a small, cautious movement, Lyra took the piece and brought it to her lips. The bread was soft, the butter rich and garlicky, the warmth comforting. She chewed slowly, her large eyes never leaving Owen. He waited, not with expectation, but with the kind of patience that only a chef who loved his craft could have. The seconds stretched out like an eternity. Lyra's expression remained unreadable, her alien features betraying no hint of approval or disdain. Finally, she swallowed, set the bread down on the plate, and met his gaze. "This is not as primitive as I thought," she said, her voice softer than before. Owen's smile widened, though he kept his excitement in check. He didn't need her to admit it, not yet. It was just the beginning. But as Lyra looked at him, a small flicker of something had shifted in her eyes. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something deeper. Either way, Owen knew that in this kitchen, with something as simple as bread, the real challenge had only just begun. The next day, Chef Owen stood by the stove, stirring a pot of soup, his mind racing as he thought about the strange encounter with Princess Lyra. Her words echoed in his mind. "Not as primitive as I thought." He had no idea what it meant, but he felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could show her that Earth's food had more depth than she gave it credit for. Princess Lyra had been silent since the previous night, her gaze fixed on everything but the bread he had made. She had watched him work, her sharp eyes observing every move, as though she were studying an entirely different species. Owen could sense her discomfort. She wasn't used to being in a space like this, a kitchen with the hum of appliances and the scent of simmering ingredients. It was so far removed from her world of sophisticated machinery and synthesized meals. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone not accustomed to being wrong. "Earth food. It's still crude. No elegance. No art." She flicked a glance at him, her eyes narrowed. "But there is something unexplainable about it." Owen put down the wooden spoon and turned to face her. She had been sitting in the same spot, watching him as if waiting for him to explain himself. "I never said Earth food was perfect," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "But what makes a meal perfect isn't always about complexity. It's about the love and care you put into it." Lyra stared at him. "Love?" "Yes," Owen smiled, thinking of his daughter. "The reason he cooked in the first place. You see, food is a reflection of the person who makes it. It's a little piece of them that they share with the world." The alien princess's eyes flickered, her brow furrowing slightly as though she were processing something foreign. "On my planet, food is produced in labs. Every meal is precisely calibrated to our needs. There is no room for emotion." Her voice softened at the last word, almost as if she found the concept unsettling. Owen could feel the wall she had built around herself. He understood it. It wasn't just food that was unfamiliar to her. It was the very idea of simplicity and care in a meal. She had been raised in a world where everything was engineered, every need perfectly met by technology. To her, food was a necessity, nothing more. "Well, on Earth, we don't have the technology to make things perfect," Owen said, his tone gentle. "But what we do have is the ability to make something that's just for you, something that speaks to who you are." He took the pot off the stove, setting it down on the counter. The rich, hearty aroma of the soup filled the air, the comforting smell of a home-cooked meal. Lyra's gaze shifted from the soup to him, her expression unreadable. "I suppose I'll have to try it then," she said, a hint of intrigue in her voice. She moved toward the counter, reaching for the spoon as she eyed the meal with caution. Owen watched as she took the first bite. The seconds stretched into what felt like a lifetime as she chewed slowly, her face betraying nothing. Finally, she set the spoon down and looked at him. "This is not what I expected." Princess Lyra had never been one to show much emotion, especially not in front of someone like Chef Owen. Yet, when she tasted the soup, her expression softened ever so slightly. There was something there, beneath the surface. Something that told him she wasn't completely indifferent to Earth's humble meals. Owen wiped his hands on his apron, watching, as Lyra set the spoon down with the tiniest hint of hesitation. "What do you think?" he asked, keeping his voice light, not wanting to push her too hard. She remained silent for a moment, her fingers tapping on the side of the bowl as she considered her words. "It's warm," she said, her voice softer than before, comforting. Owen chuckled softly. "Well, that's the idea. Sometimes, all it takes is a meal that makes you feel like you're at home." Lyra met his gaze, her large eyes unreadable. "Home," she repeated. There was something in her tone that made Owen pause. She wasn't just talking about the food, she was talking about something deeper. He could sense the weight of her words. She wasn't just here to taste food. She was trying to understand a whole new world. Deciding to push the boundaries a little further, Owen asked, "Would you like to try something with a bit more flavor?" Lyra arched an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Flavor?" she asked skeptically. Owen grinned and turned to the counter, where he had already prepared a new dish. Fresh garlic butter loaves, their crust golden and inviting, their fragrance filling the air. He'd even gone a step further this time, adding a unique twist. A blend of spices he had once learned from his grandmother, a combination of heat and depth that he knew would surprise her. Garlic butter loaves. "But this time," he said, sprinkling a pinch of chili flakes over the butter, "I'm going to give it a little heat. A dash of cayenne pepper, paprika, and a few other spices. It's something from my past. From Earth, yes, but also something more personal." Lyra studied the loaves, her alien features tight with curiosity. "Heat," she murmured, almost as if the concept were foreign to her. "What is it you are trying to achieve with this?" "Heat." "Surprise," Owen replied simply, slicing the bread into thick, warm pieces, each one topped with the spiced butter. "Food is meant to surprise you, to give you something you didn't expect, something that catches you off guard." He placed a piece of the bread in front of her, watching intently as Lyra hesitated before taking the first bite. Her gaze never wavered as she chewed, the subtle heat of the spices beginning to build on her tongue. For a brief moment, Owen thought she might reject it. But instead, her eyes widened just a fraction. She swallowed and then took another bite, her brow furrowing in thought. "This is unexpected," Lyra admitted, her voice edged with something Owen couldn't quite place. "I feel it. The heat, the intensity." "Exactly," Owen said, smiling. "That's what food does. It makes you feel things. It makes you think." Lyra looked down at the bread in front of her, her fingers brushing the surface of the loaf as though contemplating something far more profound than simple food. Then her eyes lifted to meet his. "Perhaps there is more to this earth food than I thought." Chef Owen's heart raced as he watched Princess Lyra take another bite of the garlic butter loaf. Her alien eyes, usually so calculating and cold, seemed to soften with each chew. For the first time since she had arrived, she wasn't just observing, she was tasting. And for a fleeting moment, Owen wondered if she could sense what he felt, that food, even the simplest, could transcend its form and become something far more meaningful. Lyra set the bread down gently, her eyes never leaving the plate. "This bread, it is different," she said, her tone cautious, as if she were still unsure of her own reaction. It has a certain richness, a depth." Owen smiled, trying to hide the growing pride in his chest. "It's all about the layers," he said, his voice calm but filled with the satisfaction of a chef who had just seen the first signs of recognition in a critic's eyes. "Each ingredient, each moment you spend cooking, adds a layer, and when it all comes together, that's when the real magic happens." Lyra looked at him for a long time, as if searching for something in his expression. She reached for another piece of the bread, this time more willingly. But before she could take a bite, she paused, her gaze flickering back to him. "Why?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "Why do you put so much care into something so simple?" Owen thought for a moment, the question pulling him deeper than he expected. "Because, for me, food isn't just about sustenance," he said slowly. "It's about connection. When you cook, you share a part of yourself with the people you care about. You offer something that can't be replicated by technology. It's personal." Lyra's eyes softened, but she said nothing. She picked up the bread again and took a bite, this time without hesitation. The warmth of the garlic butter spread across her tongue, and for the first time since arriving, Owen could see a hint of genuine appreciation in her expression. As she chewed, Lyra looked around the kitchen, her gaze lingering on the pots and pans, the simple tools Owen used to craft his meals. There was no advanced technology here, no alien machinery. Just a kitchen, a man, and his ingredients. For a brief second, she seemed almost lost. "On my planet," she began, her voice quiet. "We don't have kitchens like this. We don't need them. Everything is made for us, with perfect precision. There's no room for uncertainty, for mistakes." Owen leaned against the counter, studying her. "And what about the people who make it?" he asked. "Who do they cook for?" Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "They cook for efficiency, for sustenance. Not for joy?" Owen asked, his voice gentle. The question hung in the air for a moment, the weight of it heavier than either of them expected. Lyra chewed slowly, her brow furrowing as though considering the idea for the first time. "This," she said, swallowing the bread, "this is different. I can't explain it, but it feels important." Owen nodded, his smile widening slightly. It was a small victory, but it was enough. They were no longer just two people from different worlds. They were sharing something, and that was the first step. Princess Lyra sat quietly at the kitchen table, the last pieces of garlic butter bread still resting on her plate. The air between her and Owen had shifted since yesterday, a subtle change he could sense in her movements, in the way she held herself. She was no longer the aloof princess who dismissed Earth's food with a sneer. Something had opened within her, though she didn't yet seem ready to admit it. Owen wiped down the counter, trying to ignore the tension in the room. He wasn't sure what it was, curiosity maybe, or something deeper, but Lyra had begun to stay for longer, watching him cook without the same judgment in her eyes. And she had started asking questions that were less about the food and more about the life that surrounded it. "Tell me," Lyra began, breaking the silence as Owen was finishing up a fresh batch of soup. Her tone was uncharacteristically soft, almost hesitant. "What is it about cooking that makes you do it every day?" Owen glanced at her, surprised by the question. He hadn't expected her to be interested in the deeper reasons behind his cooking. "It's not just about food," he said, leaning against the counter. "It's about sharing a piece of myself. I cook because it makes me feel connected to my family, to the people I love. Even when I'm working alone, it's never truly alone." Lyra's eyes lingered on him, searching for the sincerity in his words. After a long pause, she asked, "Do you cook for anyone besides yourself?" Owen's smile softened. "My daughter," he said, his voice warmer now. "She's the reason I cook. I want her to always know what it feels like to sit at a table, to share a meal with someone who cares about her." Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze distant. "And what happens when they don't have that?" she asked, her voice quieter now, almost uncertain. Owen paused, surprised by the question. It was clear that Lyra wasn't just asking about Earth food anymore. She was asking about something deeper. "When you don't have that, I guess you feel alone," he said. "Food is more than just survival. It's a way to build relationships, to show love. Without that, you can't really connect with others." Lyra's face softened, and for a moment, Owen saw a flicker of something in her eyes, something human, something vulnerable. She seemed to be lost in thought, as if his words had touched on something she hadn't considered before. "I never thought about it like that," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "Back home, food is made for us. It's precise, efficient, but there's no one to share it with." Owen stepped closer, placing a bowl of soup in front of her. "Maybe that's what makes Earth's food different," he said. "It's never just about efficiency. It's about sharing, about making something that has meaning, something that can connect you to others, even if they're from a different world." Lyra took a slow breath, her fingers brushing the edge of the bowl. "Perhaps," she began, her voice trailing off. "Perhaps there is more to Earth's food than I thought." Owen watched her carefully, wondering if this would be the moment when the walls she had built would finally come down. The days that followed were filled with quiet tension. Princess Lyra had become more open, but the gulf between their worlds remained wide. She asked more questions now, her curiosity tempered by the remnants of her earlier skepticism. Owen could see the conflict in her eyes. On one hand, she was starting to understand the beauty of Earth's simple meals. On the other, she couldn't help but compare them to the perfection of her own world's creations. One evening, as they sat together at the table, Owen placed a freshly roasted chicken in front of Lyra, accompanied by vegetables and potatoes roasted to golden perfection. The meal was his daughter's favorite one he'd made for years. As he set the dish down, he felt a flicker of hope. This, he thought, would be the meal to bridge the gap between them. Lyra looked at the chicken, her brow furrowed, and then back at him. "It is rustic," she said, her tone slightly mocking. "There's no precision in it, no calculation. It's simply roasted." Owen's smile faded slightly, but he kept his composure. "Sometimes the best meals don't come from machines. They come from experience, from learning to trust what you have." Lyra tilted her head, clearly unimpressed. "Your world is inefficient," she said, her voice cool. "You waste resources. Your food takes hours to prepare, and you have no way of ensuring it's always perfect. Back home, we have everything we need at the click of a button." Owen took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. "I know you come from a place where everything is controlled, but that's not what life is about, Lyra. You can't predict everything. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones that are a little messy, a little unpredictable. Lyra's eyes narrowed. But that's just it, isn't it? You're so reliant on chaos, on randomness. There's no certainty. How do you survive like this? Her voice was growing more intense, more frustrated. Everything you do is inefficient. Your food, your lives, they all feel like they're struggling to catch up with something better. Owen felt the weight of her words, but he didn't retreat. Maybe, he said, his voice steady, but we don't need perfection to be happy. We don't need everything to be calculated. Sometimes, what matters is that we're here, together, sharing what we have, even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect. Lyra was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on the plate in front of her. The tension between them was thick, but something had shifted. Owen could feel it. She was listening now. She wasn't just rejecting him, she was considering it. Finally, she reached for the chicken. "I still don't understand," she muttered, her voice softer than before. But she took a bite. The room fell into silence. Owen waited, watching her. He didn't know what to expect. But maybe, just maybe, the walls were beginning to crack. The days passed, and the quiet tension between Princess Lyra and Chef Owen began to settle into something different. She still didn't fully understand Earth's food, but the skepticism was gone. Instead, there was something more thoughtful in her demeanor, a quiet contemplation that spoke louder than words. She was trying, really trying, to understand. And that was all Owen could ask for. One afternoon, Lyra entered the kitchen as Owen was preparing a simple vegetable stew. She watched him chop the carrots, potatoes, and onions, the knife moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "You cook a lot," she remarked, her tone neutral. "It must be exhausting." Owen paused for a moment, the knife stilling in his hand. "Cooking is never exhausting. It's a part of my life. It's like breathing." He resumed chopping, his movements fluid. "And it's not just about the food. It's about the process, the time it takes, the way it brings everything together." Lyra stood a little closer now, watching him with a newfound curiosity. "You don't hurry," she observed. "Why?" Owen smiled as he added the vegetables to the pot. "Because good things take time. You don't rush flavor or connection. You have to let it come naturally." She seemed to consider this, her gaze flickering over the simmering stew. "I don't think I've ever given anything time. Not like this. Everything back home is instantaneous. We can't afford the luxury of time." Owen didn't speak right away. Instead, he lifted the pot off the stove, stirring it gently. The savory aroma filled the air. "Time is what makes the difference, Lyra. It's not just the ingredients. It's how you treat them. How you allow the flavors to meld, to develop. You can't rush that. You have to trust the process." Lyra stepped closer, eyeing the bubbling pot with more interest than she had shown before. "And you trust it? You trust that everything will turn out the way it's supposed to?" "Always," Owen said, meeting her eyes. "Because it's not just about the outcome. It's about the journey, the way the dish comes together. If you give it time, you can always find something good." She nodded slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of the pot. "I think I understand," she said quietly. "But how do you know when it's ready? When it's perfect?" Owen chuckled, wiping his hands on his apron. "Perfect?" he repeated. "Nothing's perfect. But it's ready when it feels right. When it has the right balance, the right warmth. It's about trusting your senses, your instincts." Lyra looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. "Back home, we don't trust our instincts. Everything is controlled, calculated. And that's why you've never tasted real food," Owen said softly. "Because real food is about more than just numbers. It's about the soul, about what's in your heart." Lyra's gaze softened, the faintest trace of understanding appearing in her expression. She reached for a spoon, dipping it into the stew. And this time, when she tasted it, there was no hesitation. Princess Lyra was quiet as she took another spoonful of the vegetable stew, her eyes focused on the dish before her. The flavors had hit her, differently this time, deeper than before. It wasn't just the warmth or the simplicity of the ingredients. There was something about the way it made her feel a feeling she hadn't quite been able to describe until now. Chef Owen watched her, his face unreadable. He wasn't pushing for her to understand. He wasn't expecting praise. He was simply waiting. It was something he had learned over the years. That good food didn't need validation. It simply needed to be. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Lyra took another spoonful, her eyes narrowing as she considered the taste. The heat from the peppers Owen had added wasn't overpowering, just enough to balance the sweetness of the carrots and the earthiness of the potatoes. She was noticing things now, things she hadn't noticed before, things she had been too quick to dismiss in the past. "This," Lyra started, her voice quiet. "This is unlike anything I've ever tasted." She looked up at Owen, and for the first time, there was no mockery in her eyes, only something closer to curiosity, maybe even admiration. "It's balanced. It's not just heat. It's warmth." Owen allowed himself a smile, but only a small one. That's the key. It's not about overpowering one flavor with another. It's about creating harmony, giving each ingredient the time it needs to speak for itself. Lyra nodded, seemingly lost in thought. "I don't know why I didn't see it before," she murmured. "I've been so focused on perfection, on control, that I never considered what it meant to let things happen naturally." Owen leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. Perfection is overrated. It's the flaws, the little mistakes that make something real. The unpredictability. When you stop worrying about everything being perfect, that's when you start to taste what's really there. Lyra looked at him, and for a moment, Owen could see something change in her. It was subtle, but it was there, a softening of the edges, a slight shift in her perspective. She wasn't just tasting earth food anymore. She was beginning to understand it. "I always thought our food was the best," she admitted, setting the spoon down on the table. "I thought we had everything figured out. But now—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "Now, I'm not so sure." Owen's smile deepened, though he said nothing. He had never needed her to understand completely, only to open herself to the possibility that something else could exist. Something outside her world, outside the calculations and perfection. "I think you're starting to get it," Owen said, his voice gentle but firm. "And that's what matters." Lyra met his gaze, and for the first time, her expression was free of doubt. Maybe there's more to Earth than I thought." Over the following days, the shift in Princess Lyra's demeanor became more pronounced. She asked more questions, shared more of her thoughts, and, most surprisingly, she stayed for each meal. What had once been an exercise in tolerance had transformed into genuine curiosity. Owen could see it in her eyes, in the way she sampled his dishes without hesitation, in the way she no longer turned up her nose at the simplicity of Earth's food. There was no longer mockery in her tone. There was respect. One evening, as Owen prepared a simple chicken and rice dish, Lyra entered the kitchen, her usual air of aloofness replaced by something more grounded, more human. She stood silently at the counter, watching him chop vegetables. "Do you miss your home?" she asked unexpectedly, her voice softer than usual. Owen paused, looking over at her. The question caught him off guard. It had been days since they had spoken about their worlds in any meaningful way. He had been so focused on showing Lyra the value of Earth's food, its simplicity, its heart, that he hadn't stopped to think about what he missed. "I miss my daughter most of all," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "She's the reason I cook, the reason I do everything." Lyra tilted her head, her expression contemplative. "Family," she said, the word lingering between them. "I understand that. We have family too, but it is different. We are expected to be perfect, to never show weakness. My people, they would not understand your way of living." They would see it as inefficient. Owen smiled softly as he returned to chopping the vegetables. Sometimes, inefficiency is exactly what you need, he said, his voice warm. It's what makes things real. People, relationships, food, they're all a bit messy, but that's what makes them beautiful. Lyra watched him in silence, her gaze steady. I think I'm beginning to see that, she murmured. Her fingers gently traced the edge of the counter, as if she were feeling the texture of earth in a way she hadn't before. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Owen continued preparing the meal, the rhythm of his movements as natural as breathing. He could feel the weight of Lyra's presence in the room, but this time, it was different. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She had become a part of the process, part of the journey. When the dish was finally ready, Owen placed it on the table and looked at Lyra. She seemed hesitant, but after a brief pause, she sat down. For the first time, there was no judgment in her eyes, only anticipation, curiosity. She took her first bite slowly, her expression unreadable. Then, without warning, she looked up at him. It's good. It's simple, but it's satisfying. Owen smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. Sometimes the best meals are the simplest, he said, settling into his seat. And the best connections are the ones you never expect. Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was something resembling understanding in her gaze. The final meal was quiet. The kitchen, which had once been filled with the clatter of pots and the rich smells of Owen's cooking, now felt still, peaceful. Princess Lyra, no longer the cold, distant alien princess who had once scoffed at Earth's food, sat across from him, her hands folded neatly on the table, waiting for the dish he was about to serve. Owen had spent the morning preparing something special, something simple but meaningful. A hearty stew, rich with vegetables, a touch of smoked meat, and the spices that had grown familiar to Lyra over the past week. He had learned from her not just about food, but about herself. The more time they spent together, the more she let her walls down. She began to talk about her world, the people there, the endless pursuit of perfection that left little room for the warmth of human connection. As he placed the steaming bowl in front of her, he could see how different she had become, how much more human she seemed. She wasn't just the princess of an alien world anymore. She was someone who had learned to appreciate the simple things, someone who had finally begun to understand what it meant to connect with another person, to share a meal, to share a moment. Lyra picked up her spoon and took a tentative bite. The warm, savory broth filled her senses. Her eyes closed for a moment, as if savoring the experience. When she opened them again, she met Owen's gaze with a softness that hadn't been there before. This, she said, her voice steady but filled with something deeper, this is different. Her brow furrowed slightly, but there was no trace of judgment in her tone. It was as if she were searching for the right words. It's not like anything I've ever tasted. Owen waited, his hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. What do you mean? He asked, his voice gentle. Lyra set her spoon down and looked at the bowl for a long moment. It's not just about the food, she said slowly, her voice quieter now. It's the feeling, the warmth, the care you put into it. I never understood that before. Owen smiled, the warmth in his chest spreading. That's what food is about, Lyra. It's not just fuel. It's about connection, about sharing something that's part of you. She nodded, her eyes reflecting something he hadn't seen before, a depth, a quiet understanding. On my planet, we were always taught that food was just a necessity. But now, I think I see it differently. For the first time since they had met, Lyra seemed truly present, not just physically, but emotionally. It was as if, in that moment, she had allowed herself to feel the full weight of what it meant to sit at a table, to share food, to connect with another person. This, she said again, this is what I've been missing. The heart of the meal. Owen looked at her, his smile deepening. Exactly, And for the first time, Lyra didn't just understand Earth's food. She understood its heart.